Once you reach a certain level of competence, once you're at the highest echelons of human achievement, your time is, by extension, more valuable and extrapolates out. An hour with the president is worth more than 100 hours with a guy at McDonald's.
That is an absurd statement. Remember, he said earlier how he didn't exploit men. The most logical argument weighed against him is that he claims to be pro-men, but he spent all this time exploiting men, getting men to give up their money to go on fake non-existent dates with webcam girls. It's like, you can see that here. You can see that disregard for the average man, right? In the statement that he just made.
All right, so this is the last 30 minutes of the 2+ hour Andrew Tate debate with David Sutcliffe. And for those that have seen this posted in the podcast feed and may not be aware, this is part 3 of a trifecta Andrew Tate episode bonanza, however you want to think about it. And so we did the first 2 hours almost of this debate. And so we're going through the last 30 minutes here, and I'm excited to see how this ends up.
Me too.
Let's get into this. Let me know when you can see it pop up.
Mm-hmm. And we'll talk about them in a second. But I'm not a very present person, but I have sacrificed the idea of feeling presence and feeling happy in the moment for, let's say, absolute capability and legacy.
But would you agree that being more present would give you more power?
In certain scenarios. Well, look, I think that might be the reason I love fighting so much, because that's the only time I feel present.
Right.
Because I have to be right there, because 1, I'm in pain, and 2, if I'm not, I'm gonna be asleep.
Are you not present right now?
I am.
Are you present with me?
I'm paying attention. My brain's on. I'm paying attention.
Let your brain go and see what happens.
I
Just
am.
be here with me and don't stop thinking. Stop thinking.
I can't stop thinking.
Stop thinking.
I
You
am.
can't stop thinking. If you can't stop thinking, you don't have control over your mind.
All right, cool. So I stopped thinking, but
And just be in the place where there's no thinking.
Okay, pause.
And just feel yourself. Who you
I just think this is like, I don't remember the other 2 segments, honestly. So what I'm about to say could be wrong, but like, this is such a clear, explicit win for me on David's part, where he gets Andrew into a bind where he's like, oh, if you can't be present, then you actually don't have control over your mind and you want to be in control all the time. Like, it's such a 50 points for Gryffindor, moment.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I definitely understand, and I'm with you on the Sutcliffe taking the reins with the presence. And for the first 2 parts that we did, the first, hour 45 minutes of this interview, that was kind of, David Sutcliffe was alluding to the fact that Andrew lacked presence, and he was always kind of thinking of the next thing to say. And he had he's built up this warrior mentality, not only physically, but conversationally, where he's kind of like ting, ting, like anything you throw at him, he's just fucking like deflecting it back to you or making you seem like you're the one who's crazy. And now we're finally starting to see it unfold. I don't know if I disagree, but I have a different definition than David Sutcliffe of the way he's forming presence here, because I don't view presence as not thinking, because it's impossible to stop your thoughts, but more as not becoming attached, not self-identifying with those thoughts. When he says stop thinking, just be here, to me, I'm more in line with stop attaching yourself to your thoughts and start just kind of watching them float by. And it's just a thing. Like, it's not you. It's just another thing floating through the universe, like a book or a piece of grass or a guy yelling at you in traffic. Your thoughts are like in the same category. It's not always a meaningful thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's like a more sophisticated, because like when you're talking right now, I'm not really thinking about anything else. Like I'm listening to what you're saying and I'm present with what you're saying as what you say emerges, if that makes sense. Does that mean I've stopped thinking? Not like, it's not like my brain has shut off, right? It's not like there's no cognition going on, but there's a certain type of thinking that I'm actually not doing when I'm listening to you speak. It's like there's a certain use of my synapses that's happening when I'm actively listening versus when I'm like, if we were talking, if while you were talking, I was like thinking, how am I showing up on camera, and like really self-conscious, then I'm not listening to what you're saying, actually. I think that that's what he means, or that might be what he means when he says stop thinking, but I appreciate your teasing out of the, like, there's different types of thinking, and maybe he could be more clear in his language. But I also think that, like, Andrew's at level 1 of this entire way of perceiving the world and oneself, and I don't think that Andrew would be able to necessarily comprehend what we're saying until he gets to maybe like level 3 or 5.
Totally.
You are, and see what happens.
Yeah, and I believe I am, but I'm saying generally in life, I wouldn't consider myself a present person. I'm not the person who is enjoying the moment. But I am now because I'm focused. But now I'm focused.
But do you see the difference in the quality of the interaction we just had?
But okay, let me ask
you. Do you see the difference, though?
I do.
Yeah, and how did that feel?
It felt fine. But what's the difference? Fine. What's the difference? But what's the difference?
But weren't we more connected in some way? Isn't there more possibility to get to something deeper or something more truthful there when your mind is not constantly running?
But I haven't lied to you.
I'm not saying you've lied to me. Yeah. I'm not saying you've lied to me. I just said there's other levels, there's other layers, right?
Is there?
Is there? You get to it. That's why you fight. You see what you said, because it gets you out of your mind, fully in your body. And when you're fighting, you're in that zone. Some of their intelligence opens up, though.
Yes.
You're doing things. You can feel that guy, and you can miss the punch and you don't even know why.
Correct.
Right? And so that is available all the time if you're willing to get present.
Does life require that degree of focus?
Not focus, presence.
I know they're slightly different. Maybe I see them as the same. I don't see myself as a particularly present person. I do enjoy.
Do you believe in the sort of studies that tell you that you can sort of zoom in on the type of thinking that a person's doing based on where their eyes are looking?
I know someone, and I'm connected to someone who I respect deeply, who believes that. And every time she says that, my bias is to be like, that feels like bullshit. But I also don't know anything about that.
Yeah, no, I know, 5%, but probably actually less than 1% of what's out there regarding that sort of field. But I have noticed that I really didn't see Tate looking up during other parts of the interview. And I'm sure he has a couple times, but it just looks strange for whatever reason, because I am not used to seeing him look up. And maybe that was a moment of presence where he's kind of like he was really just like looking up, being like, maybe, because Sutcliffe says, it's not focus, it's presence. And he's just like, fuck. This is what this is. That's what this is. Like emptying yourself to fill yourself with the moment. So I don't know.
I will say, I think that's a good point. I do think that like I look up a lot, actually, when I'm trying to figure something out or just like getting curious about something. So just from a personal subjective reflection on what you just said, when I'm looking up, I'm not trying to be in control.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's an interesting like relationship between those two things.
Yeah. Because even your body language when you're looking up, you're more submissive.
It's like wonder and awe. It's like, woo.
The insinuation is that there's something above you that you're trying to tap into. And then when you're lying a lot of times, and again, I'm no expert on this, but that is the stereotypical association that if someone's lying, they're looking down on all the CSI criminal shows, looking down and to the left, that person's lying, but looking up, they're wondering something or something of wonder. So I'd be curious to dive more into that. Yeah.
Yeah. The presence of fighting. I do enjoy the presence of driving fast cars very fast.
Right.
I'm thinking of it, just so you understand my mental model. when I think of guys, and I do know some who are like enjoying the moment, I very rarely enjoy the moment. Does that make sense? I don't ever, I'm sitting around and like, yeah, I look around and go, I'm having fun. That's just not how my brain works, ever.
That feels sad to me.
Yeah, but this is the thing. Perhaps it is. I don't know. I'm not going to say it is because I don't feel sad about it, but let's imagine it is sad. I have no fear of feeling sad. If someone were to say to me, Andrew, you're going to enjoy the moment less because you're constantly preoccupied.
I definitely think he has a fear of feeling sad. If anyone wants to watch the first 2 episodes where we go over this, please do that.
Yes, 100%.
With running an empire that most people wouldn't believe is as large as you say it is, even if you told them. And you're going to have unlimited offspring who adore you. And you're going to have unlimited female interaction from women who truly would die for you. And you're going to be one of the most respected men on the planet. And you're going to have street cred in every city from Baltimore to Berlin. And you're going to end up going through all these trials and tribulations. And they're going to talk about your name after you're dead for hundreds of years. But you're not going to be present in the moment. Would you take that? And I would say, yes, sir, I would. Give that to me. I can't be present because there's too much happening. How can I be present? How can I be present?
Can you pause again? So just a quick side story. I'm reminded of this story of Alexander the Great when watching Tate. Alexander the Great, wanted to conquer the known world, ended up conquering the known world. But there's this famous story where he gets into a fight with one of his best friends, and he accidentally kills his best friend in this fight. And he I think the story goes that he asks advisors or wise counselors from all over the world to console him or find something to console him, and he's ultimately not consolable. I think this story is in one of those like Ryan Holiday books on Stoicism. And like managing and getting in right relationship with your emotions. And basically the moral of the story is that like Alexander the Great, very similarly to Andrew, sought the trophies, the wives, the conquering, but ultimately he couldn't get present enough to see the folly of valuing competition over just being in a healthy relationship with his best friend. And unfortunately, the price that he paid was the death of his best friend, and he regretted that till the end of his life. And so that's something to think about, especially for Andrew, who I can imagine would look up to people like Alexander the Great and Marcus Aurelius. And oftentimes, I will hear Andrew in passing reference Stoicism, but I'm not exactly sure of how much he's really engaged with Stoicism. As like Stoicism is not about simply being like Stoicism is actually not about not showing emotions. I think that is like a misreading of Stoicism. Rather, it's about getting in right relationship with your emotions so that they don't control you. But it's not about repressing your emotions either, because if you're repressing your emotions, they're actually still in control of you on some level.
Yeah.
Just thought I'd bring that up as a story, because I think that a lot of people who relate to or admire Andrew would probably also admire people like Alexander the Great. There's this meme that's been going around where women will ask men how often do they think of Rome. I don't know if you've seen this.
I haven't seen it, but my girlfriend brought it up to me the other day because she asked me first before telling me the meme, how often do I think of the Roman Empire?
What was your answer? I'm so curious now.
I said I wasn't exactly sure, but probably once every few months I'll come across something that is either directly related to the Roman Empire or just tangentially connected to it somehow. So maybe a few times a year, once every few months.
Yeah, so I can imagine that like a lot of people who, again, admire Tate on some level or think of Tate more consistently than I do or I did before knowing about him, probably the same types of people who might think about Stoicism or might think about the Roman Empire or might think about Alexander the Great more often. And it's like there is wisdom to be gleaned from thinking about those empires and those people who rule those empires. And I would challenge people to really like let their curiosity lead them, not just in terms of like, the cool fights or the cool conquests or whatever that took place within these ecosystems, but also like the wisdom that many of the men who were part of this ecosystem left behind. I think that often gets left out of quote unquote manosphere conversations around Stoicism.
Yeah. Yeah. It's hilarious to think that thinks about Roman Empire is now going to be added to the list of hinge don'ts for girls that look for a guy.
Do you think so? Do you really think that's true? I hope I hope that's not true.
I see listens to Joe Rogan is a big one. Like, don't even message me if you listen to Joe. Thinks about Roman Empire. Wears sheath underwear. I don't know. I haven't been on Hinge in so long, but I just remember some of the most popular ones. I could definitely see that sort of entering the Hinge universe as one. But that's
such a missed opportunity if that ends up being a thing.
Yeah. I agree with you said that Tate sort of gives off the vibe of stoicism, or you're alluding to that, but he may not actually practice it himself.
Yeah.
I think there's something about having a bald head and a beard that gives off a stoic vibe. Being totally
That's
serious, when I see a guy that has a bald head and a beard, something about me thinks that he's holding some sort of wisdom that I don't yet have.
That's so interesting.
There is like this wise aesthetic, and Tate definitely, he gives off that vibe. And I also felt sad, like David Sutcliffe, when I heard that. That was the first thing that I thought about. The first emotion that came to me is that feels sad. And you also mentioned something about friendships and being present. Friendships require such a presence to handle the sort of the ferocity and the roller coaster of life that comes at you when you're trying to maintain a lifelong friendship. I can think of 3 or 4 moments where I've been in grudges or spats with friends where we have this moment of presence, either in person or on FaceTime, where we just go, what are we doing? Who cares who went to the other person? Like, who cares who flew to the other person last to hang out for the weekend?
Yeah.
Let's just fucking make it happen however we can. And there are always these buildups to those sorts of moments where it does require a presence and a stoicism, and meditation definitely helps with that. And reading over a lot of like Ryan Holiday quotes and sort of things in that sort of lane that helps me think about giving into those sorts of moments. So I wonder how much better Tate's relationships with men would be if he did feel present and he did give into those moments, because he does market himself as the person that is born and bred to strengthen relationships with men. But if he had that presence, that it's such an important part to sort of drop the bullshit with the aggression that comes along with it. And just one more thing I wanted to make a note on is Tate said that he is not present because there is so much going on. And to me, that's such a backwards thing, because the reason to be present is because there's so much going on. There's so much shit going on into the world. There's so much shit going on around us all the time. That presence is the antidote to giving into every headline or every conversation, every text message. Becoming truly present in the moment to your senses, what's going on around you, hear, smell, taste, touch, is the only way to escape that. So it seems so backwards to me when Tate says, there's so much going on, and that's the reason why I'm not present, because it's I don't know, it just seems like such a reverse non-starter way to think about it.
It's also just like unsustainable, I think. I posted this quote from, I believe it was Pema Chodron, she's a famous Buddhist nun. And she says the following: what I've noticed about the people whom I consider to be awake, and just side note, it's interesting to hear the word awake in this context, because I think in this context, awake is synonymous with presence. It's like with being present, as opposed to the more common way we hear it in the common vernacular, which is like woke, right? That's interesting. What I've noticed about the people whom I consider to be awake is this: they're fully conscious of whatever is happening. Their minds don't go off anywhere. They just stay right here, with chaos, with silence, with a carnival, in an emergency room, on a mountainside. They are completely receptive and open to what's happening. It's at the same time the simplest and the most profound thing, rather like one continual pause.
The simplest, most profound thing, rather than one continuous pause.
Rather like one continual
pause.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do feel like it is a pause on everything that's happening around you. It is sort of that ability to press the pause button and just sink into the moment.
Yeah.
I like that. What'd you say her name was?
Pema Chodron.
Pema Chodron. All right. You ready to jump back in?
Hundreds of millions of dollars and DCAUT trying to put me in jail. And how can I be present? I've got things happening in my brain. I can't be present. I've got things to deal with. I've got problems. So I've sacrificed presence.
But maybe you have a mental model that says I can't be all the way present and do all of those things. And maybe that model is incorrect.
Well, presence is if you're truly present, then you're not worried about anything outside of the moment you're in.
Not necessarily.
How does that work? I'm interested in.
Yeah, I mean, because the presence, right, you can let your consciousness go out, right, and you can be aware of everything, right?
I'm perspicacious is one of my favorite words. I am aware of what's happening.
Yeah.
I'm just not particularly interested in it. So I will sit at a table where everyone's having a conversation, and I'll sit on my laptop, and I'll chime up once every hour. I hear every word. I've analyzed every word. I know who's right. I know who's wrong. I know what I could have said. I know whose brain I could have changed, what mind I could have affected. I've already considered if it's worth doing, but I'd rather do my work, and I'll ignore it all until I pop up and say 3 words and control the entire conversation and go back to my laptop.
Yeah.
I'm aware of everything. I'm just not particularly present because I feel like I've built a life which is so large that it's hard for me to be present in the moment. I'm present with my children for an hour or two, and then it's like, okay, back to work. Right. So,
was your father present with you?
No.
It's exactly how his father was with him.
What'd you say?
I said that's exactly how his father was with him.
Yeah, that's what it sounds like based on the stories he's telling.
I'm just saying, as a psychotherapist, when somebody said that, you said that he wasn't present with you. That must have been.
That didn't bother me at all.
It didn't bother you?
No. He had things to do. He's a full-grown man.
I mean, we could talk about the haircut tweet, but I didn't understand, your history that you were raised by a single mother. Your father wasn't around. Yeah. So you see him once a year.
About that, yeah. When we lived in America up to the age of 11, I saw him more often, once or twice a month maybe, and then.
When did they split?
I was 10 when they left. But I always understood he's very busy and has a lot to do. So I never.
Can you see how the boy might interpret that as my father doesn't care about me?
No.
You can see how. I understand you sitting here right now, but you understand like a little boy.
I think a little boy
might think, where's Daddy? I want Daddy. I'm here alone with Mom.
And he might be right because some fathers may not care, but my father did care.
Right.
He was just very busy.
But it must have been confusing for you.
No.
Not for the little boy.
No.
Like bring.
I'm being honest. I'm being honest. It wasn't. Okay. I never
or you cut off, or those feelings were so painful, overwhelming, you cut off from them so quickly and then created this mindset to deal with.
I never for a second felt like he didn't care about me, ever. I never felt that. It didn't cross my mind.
Consciously.
Consciously.
But is it possible that unconsciously you might have a different belief?
Son.
And that on some level, some of what you're doing in the world is motivated by that, like wanting to win the love of your father?
I think that is Semi-true, but I'll tell you, I think that's
fine.
No,
Fine.
that's semi-true.
Judgment.
That's semi-true because I believe I have a duty to my ancestors. I don't think it's coming from a place of I'm broken trying to fix myself. I think I have the last name Tate. It was bestowed upon me, and I have responsibilities to live up to the last name Tate.
Yeah.
I do believe I have a duty to my ancestors. So is that trying to win the love of my father? Perhaps. I never felt unloved by my father, ever. In fact, I would argue I had the best father on earth. I never felt like I was owed all of his time. It was very clear to me at a young age that he's extremely busy and extremely important, and that I can earn his time, or that I can't have as much of it as I want.
You have to earn his time?
Yeah.
That was a son should have to earn his father's time?
Yeah, why not?
Because he's a boy.
True.
And
So
the
I
father's love should be,
No.
at least for a boy, unconditional in some way.
Love and time are not necessarily the same thing.
Okay.
If I told my father, I want to play chess, I want you to teach me chess, he could find 2 hours. If I said to Dad, I want to play video games or let's watch TV together, he'd say, no, son, I have things to do.
Right.
So to a degree, I'd earn his time.
Yeah.
His time was valuable and it could not be wasted.
Yeah.
I feel like I have a duty to my ancestors. I don't feel like, and when I'm in jail,
Can you pause? It sounds like his father also, to a certain extent, lacked presence. Like lacked the capacity to be present, in the sense that, like, based upon what Andrew is saying, his father only saw the value of spending time with his son if it was in a context of chess, right, specifically. But if it was in a totally new, different context, or whatever, different context, then it was a waste of time. And the question for me is, like, can you experience every moment, whether it's playing chess with your son, whether it's going fishing with your son, whether it's watching TV with your son, like, can you experience all of those moments as simply, like, an incredibly beautiful experience of what it means to be alive, and what it means to be human, and what it means to be a father, and what it means to, serve all these roles? It's like, if you can only experience presence in a context that is, like, transactional, right, or quantifiable, it's like, if I do this, then I will get this reward, then it's arguably not really presence, or it's arguably not really a flow state, if the only thing that motivates you is, in the case of chess, and also in the case of fighting, can I win? As opposed to, can I experience the joy of being alive in this moment?
Yeah, it's a very transactional mentality when it comes to Tate and his father, and then also the father looking at his son, evaluating, are these activities worth my time, rather than just being with my son regardless of whatever we do, whatever my son chooses to do.
Yeah.
And it makes sense, Tate, having said that he has trouble being present, because if I was hardwired to have that sort of brain when I was a kid, in terms of, spending time with your father is almost like a business where you have to provide a return on investment. Like you literally have to be a return on your father's investment of time in order for him to deem that it's worth to spend more time with his son. And I can relate to that as an adult, because being in the podcasting business, media business, when I do have free creative time, my head is I'm thinking ahead, what am I doing? What am I not doing? How can I leverage my time better? But I was never really thinking about that as a kid. I was never playing video games thinking, could I leverage my time with my father better? How can I be a better return on investment as a son? That thought never crossed my mind. So if he's growing up with that sort of transactional mentality, it makes sense that he has trouble being present, because he was brought up to think ahead. You have to think ahead to make someone feel that they're getting a big return on your investment. You have to constantly be like, all right, what is my father like? What is he not like? What happened last time? Almost like thinking about it from a business Excel spreadsheet perspective. Like, these are the last 10 times I spent more than an hour with my father. What do these 10 things have in common in order to launch me into the next phase of father-son business?
Right. That's really sad.
Yeah.
I feel like I
incredibly
can't disappoint him.
Yeah.
And I feel like I do good for the world. I don't think this is me being some kind of broken secret. This is where we're going to disagree. You're going to think I'm some broken child inside or something. Okay. Well, the inner child, or I'm guessing, but
Well, yes, inner child.
okay.
Yeah.
I don't think it's anything to do with
You have
that.
an inner child?
I think it's duty. I think I have duty and I have honor.
Yeah, I understand you have duty as a man, but that doesn't mean the inner child is not there. And I guess that's if the inner child has been disowned in some way, or his feelings have been relegated to the unconscious, like that's impacting you, that's affecting you, and knowing what those feelings are and how they impacted you, I think, would be important information for you.
But I was never sad. I can't say I had a hard childhood. I can't say I was sad. I can't say I wish he was different. Once again, and once again, let me psychoanalyze myself.
Yeah.
Once again, this might be rationale. I might be rationalizing.
Yes.
I might say, well, whatever happened made me the person I am today, and I love who I am today, so I'm glad it was the way it was. Perhaps. But once again, I think that puts me in the correct mental framework to be as capable as possible. I'm not going to sit here and say, I wish my dad did something else. What's the point? That's asinine.
Both things can be true, though. I wanted to see my father more. I wish he was there, and he wasn't. And now I'm here, and I'm going to make the best of it. And this is the result of that. And I've turned myself into this beast because of it. I mean, you made the most of the situation, but that doesn't discount the place where you may have wanted more from him. You may have wanted more love, more connection, just more time.
I think my father did the best he knew how to do, and second, he did exactly what was necessary to make me the person I am today.
Would it be okay for you to be angry with your father?
No, absolutely not.
Why
It's
not?
disrespectful.
Why not? Why?
Because he's my father.
But I'm not saying that you would have to confront him. I mean, obviously he's not here, but it's just like.
That's selfish.
But if it's just a feeling, right? If it's just a feeling that wants to come.
It's ungratefulness.
Okay, can you pause? So there's this. So we teach this at Theory of Enchantment, actually. This psychological phenomenon known as splitting, and splitting is oftentimes what a child will do to make sense of, let's say, the chaos that's going on in their home environment. And splitting is very simple heuristic that we have in our minds to make sense of that chaos. So, like, in Andrew's case, it seems like the heuristic that he made in his mind is like, my father is good. And anyone, let's say, who disagrees with me, or let's say perhaps disagrees with my father's way of parenting, is bad. Right? Like a very simple black and white heuristic. Why? And you saw this in his commentary on Islam, where he was like, this religion is very simple, right? It's a very simple thing to conceptualize. This is good, this is bad. This is good, this is bad. But of course, reality is far more complex. Like, what we want to do is get to a stage where we're actually able to see and hold space for both. Like, yes, and. Like, I was talking to someone else earlier today, and I was like, I am both proud of my upbringing and embarrassed by certain aspects of my upbringing, of how my parents raised me. Like, it is a certain level of sophistication to be able to hold space for both, to be able to say both, to be able to embody both feelings. And Andrew isn't able to do that at this stage in his life. So
is splitting something that Andrew is doing now to his childhood retroactively, or splitting something that he was doing as a child and has just continued into adulthood, kind of like dissociation?
I think it's the latter. I think he probably, as a defensive mechanism, like, do you know the story of his? We talked about his like nightlight story.
Yeah,
whatever,
the nightlight story and the haircut story you told me.
Yeah. So the nightlight story is instructive because that happened when he was 5 years old or 6 years old. So like really, really young. And so you can imagine your father puts you in a situation where you're forced to like, not just not have a nightlight, but you're thrown into a room for daring to even ask for a nightlight and for daring to express that you're afraid of the dark. So you can imagine a child as a defensive mechanism, right? This is an adaptive strategy that we as human beings have cognitively in order to make sense of the chaos or the range of emotion that we experience when our father does something like that to us. Fear, awe, anger, love, all those things. What we can do as a defensive mechanism, because we can't handle all of those overwhelming feelings, is simply split and put father into the category of good, and therefore everything he says is good, everything he does is good, every way in which he acts is good. This is how I'm going to make sense of the landscape in front of me, because otherwise I literally can't handle as a child, you can't handle all those emotions. You don't have the tools, the sophistication to be able to handle the complexity of all of those emotions, because you're just a kid. And unfortunately, I think, and I don't think society actually offers us as human beings the tools to be able to know this in mass, like in the mainstream. And so one of the reasons why I'm really grateful that we're having this conversation is hopefully it will help more people become aware of these things. But like, I think Andrew just continued with that defensive mechanism as he became an adult, and it has served him well, right? He is correct that he's been able to make all this money and attract the attention of all these women and attract the attention of many young men. But many of those same young men are also attracted to him because I would guess they encountered not necessarily the same, but similar experiences in their childhood, similar patterns of adaptive strategies to deal with that. And so like attracts like, and that's partially what's happening here.
Yeah, I was thinking that before, that I sense that a lot of people have these transactional relationships with their fathers growing up, and that Tate is this, the speaker for that sort of childhood, because he's really good looking, he's eloquent, he's charismatic, he's funny, he's entertaining, and part of the reason why he's been able to have the reach that he has with the most Googled person on the planet, setting YouTube on fire, is... All right, we are back. The Wi-Fi gods cut out. So I was in the middle of talking about how hot Andrew Tate was. Maybe maybe I just burnt down Riverside with that comment, but I was saying that what was I saying? I was saying he's kind of like this spokesperson for men with the type of childhood where you have a transactional relationship with your father, and he's good looking, he's eloquent, charismatic, entertaining, funny. And part of the reason why he's so widespread in his reach is because there's a lot of men that have that sort of father-son relationship where they're trying to earn the time of their father.
Yeah, and I will say that I suspect that it will be useful for the viewer for every time Andrew says something definitive about what a father should be like, or rather what he should be like, right? How he should show up in relationship to others, whether it's presence or lack of presence, whether it's relationship to women. Just assume that he is simply reflecting what he saw in childhood. So don't assume that it is objectively true. He's going to say it with a lot of conviction and a lot of emotional resonance. And the reason why it will come across as being, the reason why it comes across as being true is because he says that with such passion, resonance, conviction. But the reason why he's able to do that is because it lives in his body as true. Like, his nervous system was conditioned by the ecosystem that he grew up in childhood. So the reason why he's he's able to show up in the way that he's showing up is not because he's lying to you, right? He keeps insisting that he's not lying today, and he's not lying. But what he is saying is a reflection of his upbringing, right? And so we have to be able to tease out the difference, because what we mistakenly do is we assume that because someone is saying something with conviction and passion and emotional resonance, that it's true. But what it actually is an adaptive response to a childhood where certain pain points were present.
Yeah, and this applies to everyone. This applies to you and me, but just like imagine. So you hear and see what Tate is saying here, where he goes, I'm not angry with my father. My father was a great father. He did everything well. Imagine that response transposed upon Tate traveling back in time and watching his child self interact with his father. I would bet so much money that he would not have the same conviction that he has now when he is describing the way he grew up as a child. And I would also have that. I think I know what happened to me when I was 5 or 7 or 8, but I'm just remembering, and it happened a long time ago, and there's so many narratives that have been layered on top of layers on top of layers. So you kind of create these stories about how you grew up, but when in reality, if you were confronted with these scenes of you going back in time and looking at, what happened to you as a child, I would definitely not have the same responses as me trying to remember what happened. And I suspect Tate would, concede, maybe his dad didn't always do the right thing, or maybe his dad didn't have to be that transactional or that hard on him when he was a kid.
Yeah.
So that's how I saw my father living his life, and that's how I want to live my life. I will do the same thing. I don't think I would be the same man if I decided to say, okay, I have a son now, so I'm just going to stay at home. And I think that I need to be a kind of man my son wants to emulate, which means I have to be a hero, and I don't think you can be a hero sitting at home. So I think that I need to, he needs time, of course he does, but he also needs an example set, and that example must be set out there in the harsh, brutal realities of the real world. So, it's time. Now the argument is quantity of time versus quality of time. And I would argue that the quality of time I will give my sons is going to be much higher than another.
You would want to give them that.
Oh, completely.
You'd want to give your sons more quality time than you had with your father.
I'll give them the exact same amount as he gave me.
So can you pause for a second?
Will you?
But if I'm happy.
I think this is a... This is a piece of self-deception on Andrew's part, where he makes what I believe is a false distinction between quantity of time and quality of time. I think that depth of relationship can not be achieved without quantity of time. Like, the more time you spend with someone, or the more time someone spends with you, the greater complexity and depth of personhood can come out of that. Now, that doesn't mean that if you spend more time with someone, it will necessarily come out, right? It doesn't mean that, like it's very possible that if Andrew had spent more time with his father would have still acted in the same ways that he acted, right? But it's definitely not the case that quality of time can be achieved if I'm only spending 5 minutes with you. Or, certainly as a child, if I only saw my father at the age of 10 once a year, right? By definition, the quality of time will not be that great because we're just not spending time together. He's like trying to superimpose a transactional framework on time, and it just like doesn't, on quality of relationship, and it doesn't work.
Yeah, imagine your dad coming home from work and saying to his son, "Okay, the next 2 minutes, it's not going to be a lot, but it's going to be super high quality. We're going to have a catch for 1 minute. We're going to do push-ups for one, and we're going to pack 10 hours of normal person time into 2 minutes of Tate time right here."
Right.
It doesn't. And
then he's like, "Okay, see you next
sense.
year after the 2 minutes are up." It's like, what are you talking about?
Yeah. And also, he just admitted that he doesn't feel presence, and he's not the type of person that becomes present. How do you spend quality time with someone without being present? I don't think you can, because you're not really with the person if you're not in the moment.
Yeah, you're not paying attention.
Yeah.
Would you not want to give them more?
I may want to.
You wanted more.
I didn't say I wanted more. Oh. That's smart. I didn't say I wanted more.
You didn't? Yeah,
No.
You must have.
No, I'm saying that.
Boy wants time with his daddy. How can? I mean, it has to be true.
If I wanted it, I could have earned it anytime I wanted.
Well, are you sure about that?
This is so revealing.
I mean, when we go, I don't know if we need to read the tweet, but it's like, your mom was pretty upset with him. So he was like, "I'm not coming back here." I mean, it wasn't just about you, it was about your mother.
Oh, completely. And I think my father sacrificed his marriage for us boys. Mm-hmm. He sacrificed his marriage and his relationship with my mother to ensure that us boys were taught the way he believed we should be raised. Mm-hmm. My mom was very unhappy with certain things he did, which he insisted on doing anyway because he saw his legacy in us as more important than his marriage with my mother.
Can you pause for a second?
But I'm not saying, look, if my son called...
This makes zero sense to me. It's like, from his vantage point, his father sacrificed his marriage in order to raise his children by only being present in their life once a year. Like, I don't understand this logic at all. like he arguably could have instilled more of a legacy in his sons' lives simply by being present more.
Yeah, it's like, I'm going to martyr myself with this marriage. Okay, now I'm out of this relationship. I have all this time, but I'm still not spending it with my sons. So
I'm
which
just,
one is
not gonna be there?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
It's such a...
really
Sorry, one
talk
more
to you.
quick
I wanna
thing
say,
that
no,
I
you
just
can't
thought
talk.
of. It's like, it is a crystal clear portrayal of rationalization as a defensive mechanism.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
To me. I'm not psycho, right? I understand all of these things. I'm just saying, obviously we're talking about a very general scenario. The general scenario is, I'm a man, I'm away at war, I come home with a story, or if I'm spending time with my son, I want us to be building him as an individual. I believe that the mother does a lot of the day-to-day keeping the child alive, changing diapers, feeding them, etc. And the man is the one who instills a lot of the mindset, and the man is the one who grows them in very important ways. And I think to do that, I need to be a man of genuine capability. And I would argue that the 2 hours a month or 2 hours a week or whatever I spent with my father, him being the man he was worth more than the 200 hours a month that most men spend with their fathers. That's why I am the man I am. Yeah. So there'll be some fathers who sit and say, I could never do that to my son. Well, what can you do?
I think that actually it's the absence of his father that made him the man that he is. Like, he can't conceive of who he would be if his father had spent that 200 hours with him. My hypothesis, which is not provable, is that he would be a different person by definition. Mm-hmm. Right? So it's like a catch-22. It's not... And for him to, like, make this generalization and compare and contrast himself to other men whose fathers spent more time with them is, like, such a... I don't even know what to call that. It's just, like... Again, I think it's another rationalization. But... It seems to me that Andrew is who he is not merely because of the time that his father spent with him, but because of the time that his father did not spend with him.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think going along with that, it's also very revealing that the first thing out of his mouth when he was talking about spending time with his father was 2 hours a month, and then he goes, maybe a week. I don't know what it was. It seemed like he almost self-corrected, not because he thought it was more accurate 2 hours a week, but he was thinking, 2 hours a month is so unacceptable to the average person. I have to change that to the week. Like, no one's going to be on my side unless I get it down to the 2 hours a week.
Yeah.
And even if it's 2 hours a week, I'm going back to what we just said, where his dad's not married anymore. Sure, you have work, but what, in terms of priorities, if being a man and being a good father is part of being a good man, where was his dad? Because you can't get around putting in the time. He obviously values time with work, with social media, with fighting. If I ask him about quality of time in fighting, can I spend 2 hours a week in the gym and become a kickboxer? He is a 4-time world kickboxing champion. If you told him, if you asked him, could you do exactly what you did in kickboxing, but spending 2 hours a week because you're spending quote unquote quality time in the gym versus wasting all those extra hours, of course he would say no. And if he said yes, he'd be lying, because like you said, you can't make these, he's molding his own projections into this quality versus quantity conversation when time in general precedes that argument. You can't talk about quality versus quantity without the investment of time first. You need a minimum investment of time to be considered a good father. You can't put in minutes or hours.
You can't like skirt around that issue. It's just like it doesn't work. It's like you're willing to enter into a deeper relationship with chess or fighting. You understand the importance of spending long periods of time in relationship with those activities, but you don't understand the importance. And you understand that makes you a better chess player or makes you a better fighter, but you don't see how spending more time with your children makes you a better father. Like how does that, that doesn't quite, that doesn't work. One quick thing, I will have to jump at the 45-minute mark. If we don't finish, I figure we can just finish at another time and then like put the two videos together for part 3, if you're cool with that.
Okay. Yeah, 100%. Whenever you have to go, just let me know and we'll wrap it up.
Okay, cool.
You can go do fucking basically nothing with your life, pay your taxes, come home, be bitched at by your wife, be quiet about it, and be with your son all the time. Sure, you win in quantity of time, but who you are as a man and what the lessons you can really teach, you lose in quality of time. So I believe my father was such a fantastic figure that it's the quality of his time that made up for the quantity. And the only way to do that is to go out in the world and be fantastic. And we can actually extrapolate this out to other things. Let's look at relationships, for example. I see men who spend every day with their woman. That's fantastic. That's fine. That's how he elicits her love and her attention.
Rationalizing?
I'm completely. That's how he I am. That's how my brain works.
Yeah.
I see men who spend every day with their woman, which is fantastic. He wants to, she wants to, that's great. They're happy. She feels loved and she feels respected and she's glad she has all of his time. When you reach a certain quality of man, a certain level of man in terms of competence, a certain echelon, I don't have to spend all day with a woman. I can see a woman 1 hour a month and she'll be loyal to me.
Because this is what his father did. This is what again, keep in mind to the viewers, everything he is saying is probably what his father modeled. And so in his rationalization, father equals good, father equals hero, father equals the best. So everything my father did is the best. And my father represents the highest quality of man you could ever be. Therefore, once you reach a certain quality of man, you don't have to spend time with your significant other. And I also want to say, I won't call it a Freudian slip, whatever. I think it is revealing that he said a few seconds ago that he doesn't want to live in a situation where, or a man shouldn't have to live in a situation where he's getting quote unquote bitched at by his significant other. I bet that is, if not what objectively happened, what was happening from his father's perspective in relationship to his mother, right? So again, everything that he's saying is not objectively true. It is how he perceived it given the conditions that he grew up in. So just have to keep that in mind, because again, the force with which he says it, the passion with which he says it, makes it seem really true. But remember the ecosystem that we're exploring here.
Yeah, it's like his own self-perception, rationalization as the counterpunch to what Sutcliffe is digging deeper and deeper and deeper into.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. Because the quality of who I am and the quality of my time outweighs the quantity which can be offered by a lesser being. Yeah. So you can put this in nearly any dynamic. You can put it in a romantic relationship and also in a family dynamic. Once you reach a certain level of competence, once you're at the highest echelons of human achievement, your time is by extension more valuable, and it extrapolates out. An hour with the president is worth more than 100 hours with a guy at McDonald's. Yeah. It's the same. Yeah. So I think my father raised me
That's absurd.
Yeah.
That is an absurd statement.
Yeah.
Right? Like the 100 hours of the guy. I mean, and again, remember he said earlier how he didn't exploit men. And you know, the most logical argument weighed against him is that he claims to be pro-men, but he spent all this time exploiting men, getting men to give up their money to go on fake non-existent dates with webcam girls. It's like, you can see that here. You can see that disregard for the average man, right? And it's in the statement that he just made. And it's like, actually, you know, I'm making this up, but like, actually, James, who works at McDonald's, might be an incredible human being who I do want to get to spend quality time with. Just, again, if I'm able to be present and I'm able to take in the wonder and awe of what it means to be alive, I'm not in a transactional, like, weird robotic, you know, scoreboard keeper of, oh, my sense of worth is based on whether or not I met the president versus hanging out with the scum of the earth James at McDonald's. Like, it's so contemptible, this type of ethic that he's promoting here, that we really have to, like, not let those things or those types of things slide, because it's incredibly contemptible, it's incredibly debasing to the average man.
Yeah. And everything he's saying is based on some sort of inherent transaction of social currency through hanging out. But that's not how relationships work. You don't... Right. Hanging out with the president doesn't automatically make you the vice president or the secretary of state going into his cabinet. Social currency doesn't rub off because it's dependent on how other people think of you. And if there is a currency for time, if you go along with Tate's perspective of it, that time equates to some sort of transaction, it's wisdom. And if you have a choice of hanging out with the president or someone else in a very high upper echelon social status position, that may be a complete bust in terms of you acquiring wisdom. Whereas if you talk to a guy who worked at McDonald's for 20 years, that could be one of the most life-changing conversations you've ever had in terms of you downloading the wisdom of experiences from what that guy did, what that guy didn't do, hearing about his life. So that to me is the ultimate, if you were going to put a dollar sign on time, it's the wisdom that you download as someone who has less experience in life versus when the tides start to turn and maybe you're talking to someone with less experience than you, the wisdom that you can impart on others to make their life easier, make their life a little bit less painful. That is the transactions. That has nothing to do with social status or social currency.
Absolutely. He raised me by being out there and doing so many fantastic things and being such a fantastic
He
individual.
raised me by not being here.
Yeah. I was like, did he just say that?
He raised me by not being present with me.
Yeah.
All right,
Somewhere
well.
somewhere there's a video of Tate throwing a baseball to a glove on a stick that says "Dad." It's like,
Listen,
look,
and I don't want to come across as like glib or, it's very sad. Like, this is very, very sad and tragic. And I know that there are men out there or, young teenage boys out there who have experienced similar situations with their fathers. And that's, humor. We use humor to lighten things up, but like, I just want to be forthcoming and also recognizing like this is deeply sad, guys. Like, we need to really take stock of that.
Yeah, and this just sparked something in my head thinking about some of the conversations I've listened to, and I mentioned, I think on part 1 or part 2, that I'm a big fan of stand-up comedy podcasts because comics are so revealing because it's usually required in their line of work to be funny. And something I'll often hear comedians say is, my dad was the best, my mom was not the best, but at least they were there. At least they were around. So that was something that made my childhood a lot better than other people, is that, the time with my parents is was something to be valued, and they're human beings. No one is the best parent. Everyone fucks up, but at least they were there. They showed up to my games. They hung out with me after school, spent time on the weekends. And there's this sort of through line of presence. And it doesn't seem like you can have a fulfilling childhood, no matter how quality the time is, if your memories don't involve you being with your parents.
Right. I feel like I feel like people understand this.
Yeah.
Like, it's such a basic thing that I'm kind of surprised that he's willing to die on this hill, but I think that is ultimately a defensive mechanism.
Yeah, maybe he absorbed these arguments from his dad because his dad would talk like this to his mom, where his mom said things like, "You're never around, you see Andrew once, 2 hours a month. Why?"
Yeah.
And then he's just sitting there as an 8-year-old kid listening to his dad argue these talking points and and I'm completely just guessing, but you absorb the things that you hear when you're a kid. You don't necessarily understand it, but it stays in the back of your head. Maybe his dad is making similar arguments to his mom right in front of him.
That I understood I had a duty to him and a duty to my last name, and I can't be his son and not be fantastic. So I think he raised me in absence. That's what I think he did.
You're proud of yourself that you got there.
Wow, there you go.
Won that one.
But I think he did.
That's good. No, that's actually a fair argument. That would be the argument about God's will. That was God's will.
Correct. Yeah.
And so I have to surrender to it, and this is what it is, and my task is to deal with it. And maybe there are feelings you have about it that you don't fully understand, but that's okay.
Yeah.
You're here now, and you're doing your thing, and you're living your life, and it's all good.
Yeah.
So let me ask you, and maybe this will be the last question.
I can go forever, my friend, so you tell me.
We'll see.
And I am, and the reason I wanted to talk to you is because I genuinely did want to learn about myself.
Yeah, I know.
And I do like discussing these things, and like I said, I'm being as vulnerable as I can be. If you feel like I'm shielding, I'm truly not trying to.
Well, when we shield, it's so habitual, it's so quick. Right, our defense is, we become identified with our defenses, so we don't even know when we're doing them.
That's true, but I also feel like the framework that I've instilled, the rational mind, everything is going through this filter. This is how my brain operates. My filter is brutal rationality. Yeah. That's the filter. So no matter what we're discussing or any conversation we're having, it has to go through this filter, and I end up rationalizing because that's the way I've always functioned.
Of course.
And so I can't turn off that. I can't start saying things that don't make sense to me.
Yes, and what I'm also aware of is that I am bringing my own filter, and you're open to it. You're not closed off to it. You're listening. You're curious about it. So I sense that too, and I appreciate that. You know, you talk about yourself as a man of capability.
Correct.
Man of courage.
Yep.
Right. Man of action.
Yes.
Are you a man of love?
I think a lot of those things come from love. Let's analyze this. I think a lot of those things come from love. I think it's very difficult to do nearly anything important if it's not perhaps to a degree driven by love or the desire for love even. I think the reason a lot of men want to become rich is because they want to feel loved or feel important or to matter. I also feel like the reason that a lot of men do the things they do is for love either of themselves or of someone else. I think the reason men go to work is because they love their family. The reason you go to the gym is because you love yourself. I think that love is a very powerful driving force. I certainly feel love. My world is full of love. Like, I would argue I'm one of the most loved people on the planet. Like, if I check my phone, it's just love.
Yeah.
It's endless emails of people I don't know who love me, endless females who do know me love me, endless pictures of children saying they miss me. Like, I'm a very loved person in a very loved world. I love a lot of people.
You love.
I absolutely love. But because I believe in myself.
Did you hear that? He said he was talking about love, and he said it's endless photos from children saying they miss him.
Right. Yeah.
Like,
you caught
that's
that, huh?
yeah, that's love. Like, people telling you they miss you is love, which I guess is a form of love, but ultimately you want people to talk about spending time with you and say,
Right.
you know, last weekend is great. Not, you know, the 2019 hangout was so amazing. You know, when are we gonna fucking do it? When am I gonna see you again?
Yeah. Yeah. There's this saying that trauma not transformed is transferred. And I feel like we might be seeing a little bit of that here.
Yeah.
Self so strongly, I feel like the way I love them is to have a degree of authority over them. Not in a crazy psychopathic way, but in a I love you, so you should do this.
Right.
I love you, so act this way. I love you, so don't do that. Almost in the same way a parent loves a child. You love your child, so you don't let them eat candy all day because you love them.
Yeah.
I'm like that with everyone in my life because I see myself as the most competent person on the planet. So I'm like, I love you, I care about you. You shouldn't do this way.
Right.
Because you may think you know better, but you don't. You don't know better than me. I know best, and this is how it should be.
So pause.
For anyone I care about.
I guess the reason.
This is very unhealthy. I just want to say that at the onset. Very unhealthy that his sense of what love is simply to tell people what to do and what not to do. Like, this is the only definition of love for him, at least so far that we've heard. It's like the capacity to tell people what to do and what not to do. This isn't just true for the personal people in his life, that he's turned an entire brand. He's made an entire brand doing this. He's developed a brand doing this. And the audacity of thinking that essentially you have an infinite amount of knowledge such that you can tell anyone on the face of the planet what to do and what not to do is just, that is Icarus. That is like Icarus level arrogance, hubris, etc. Like the amount of varied experiences that exist across the human race is infinite, right? Like, I can learn from anyone I meet, whether it's the president or the guy working at McDonald's, right? Andrew can learn from anyone he meets, whether it's his children or his significant other, right? Like, he is, I think, really missing out, actually, on the kind of a relationship with life that makes that evident, that you can learn anything from anyone, and you don't have to be in this mode where either I'm telling you what to do or what not to do, and that is the extent of my relationship, or I'm absent, right? And I'm out there in the world doing my thing, and and when I'm in the world, I'm telling whoever I'm looking at what to do and what not to do. It's like such a one-track, narrow way to live your life. And on some level, I actually don't think it's that powerful. I mean, obviously, our society really values and holds up having money and trophies and all these things as power. But there's a kind of like shallowness to that type of power that is closer to, I don't want to say powerlessness, but it's like quasi power. It's like a fake form of power. It's not a real form of power.
Yeah. Yeah. The language, yeah, it does strike me as sort of this quasi power, fake form of power when he's talking about being this daddy figure, but he's speaking about his relationship with other adults. He's not talking about children.
Yeah.
And do these other people in his life also give in to that relationship? Did they view him as a daddy figure? His coworkers, his brother, his whatever girls he's with, did they bend to that authority figure position, or is this a one-sided thing? I'd be curious to see how long a relationship with Andrew Tate could last if you were in his life, but you didn't view him as daddy. You didn't bend to his authority. Does he filter his relationships out like that? And it makes me think about a moment that I had on a previous podcast. I spoke to this guy, Rick Allen Ross, who deprograms people from cults.
Cool.
And we spoke about Andrew Tate, because this was around the time when the allegations were first coming out, and we spoke about him in terms of, I was asking him, what do you think of Tate as a cult leader? And he thought that he possessed the potential to start a cult with how charismatic he was and his following. And I was more on the side of, I don't really think he's a cult leader. I think, it's kind of bullshit. But hearing the language that Tate has used these last few minutes, where he's saying love is exercising authority, I am in control, I know what's best for everyone else, strikes me as cultish and not that far off from starting a group. And he's such a badass when it comes to the physicality of being a man. Like he could kick the shit out of other people, and he's very charismatic and well spoken, and a lot of cult leaders don't possess those sorts of physical aspects in terms of like dominance and being able to be an amazing fighter. A lot of times it's like all talk, and you have to prey on the less vulnerable. But I don't know. It's when he was saying that, it struck me as cultish, and it just made me think about the conversation I had about cults, and now I see him as a little bit closer to a potential cult leader than I have in the past, based on those last few comments.
It could be argued that his webcam business was cult light, right? Like, and he was just sort of exploring those dynamics. Also, my suspicion is that the people who are attracted to him on a personal level, and who do see him in that sort of like father figure, but like in a weird way, my guess would be they also have a father wound. Like, that would explain the attraction, the draw to everything that he's saying. Whether it's the guys who admire and look up at him, or the women who gravitate towards him as well. It's like, what where for the women, I'm curious, like, where have their fathers been? Have their fathers also been absent in their lives? Were their fathers absent in their lives as children?
Yeah.
What dynamic then does that play? Because one of the defensive mechanisms that we have as human beings is over-identifying with our wounds, similar to over-identifying with our defensive mechanisms. So if my father wasn't present in my life, then I might have abandonment issues and seek out a partner who will abandon me because it's familiar to me. And it's easier for me to go after what is familiar, even though it might be painful. It actually plays out something that my nervous system is used to experiencing. That is that's actually less scary than encountering the unknown in a partner that's actually going to show up and be present, because I'm actually not used to people showing up, or I'm not used to men being present in my life. So
like beings, showing up
we are something else.
Like showing up is almost a threat to your preconceived reality. It's like, dude, stop like trying to hang out with me on the weekends. Like, what are you, gay? Like, get away from me. Like,
exactly.
Guys don't hang out more than 2 hours a month. That's crazy. But yeah, I guess I don't even know. This may just be a crazy thought, but David Sutcliffe said something offhandish before where he goes, in another time you might have been a Genghis Khan, you might have been a Genghis Khan figure, and I would love to see there's no way to know what Genghis Khan's personality was like outside of his accomplishments or conquering from the history that was left behind. There's no TikToks or podcasts of Genghis Khan. I'm curious if these sorts of personalities, the once in a generational Tate type personalities that have all of these things combining into one that becomes this global force, is that just something that happens throughout human history, and then that human form that was conceived with this personality just takes over whatever sort of control society is giving into at the moment. So when Genghis Khan was born, that was land. Land was control. In order to conquer the world, you had to kill people and take over. And now it's attention. Now it's social media. And I wonder how close a Genghis Khan type personality, and I'm like putting aside the murder and the sorts of like the more violent aspects. I'm not saying Tate is synonymous with that. Like if he were born thousands of years ago, he would have killed millions of people.
Yeah,
I'm saying like if you met Genghis Khan in a bar today, and you also met Andrew Tate, how similar would they be with women and friends and their like the father of Genghis Khan? And so, yeah, I wonder if that's just something that happens throughout the folds of human history, that these once in a generation personalities are born, and then whatever is the landscape of control, they just lock into that and they take it over.
Yeah, I'd be curious to know what, if any, are the similarities between how these two men were raised. That's what I'd be curious about. And there's this book called For Your Own Good. I may have mentioned it in a previous episode, written by child psychologist Alice Miller, where she explores the childhoods and the upbringings of 20th century authoritarians. And she actually unpacks like how they were raised, what was their relationship with their parents, a lot of verbal abuse, a lot of violence, and how did that manifest later on in what we now know as these historical figures. So yeah, super interesting stuff.
Yeah.
Ask the question is, can you defeat the Matrix by fighting it? Or can you only defeat the Matrix through love?
Absolutely, that's a very astute question, and you're asking because you already know the answer.
And you already know the answer.
Of course, only love can win.
Yeah.
Only love can win.
Yeah.
And it's the most powerful driving force on the face of the planet. It always has been. And it's only when people are going to wake up and have a true love for themselves and love for their community and love for their children and love for these things that we're going to start to resist the evil and the Satanism and the insanity which is coming in the world.
By the way, I know you said you had to leave at 45. I see it's 46 right now.
Oh,
so
yeah.
if you have to get out, we can do the
I
last
should probably
10,
pause.
12 minutes or so.
Let's pause here. Just remember to go back at the beginning of this sentence that he just said for the next one.
Yeah, I'm gonna write down the time code as soon as we end off.
Cool.
And yeah, we'll do the last 10 minutes for the final segment. The last.
Awesome. This
Can't
is great.
wait. Chloé Valdary, this is it. Part 3.2 of Andrew Tate, because technically we started part 3, but this is the last 12, 13 minutes of the 2+ hour debate. So I am very excited.
I am too.
So we were talking about a comment right before we started recording on Instagram, and it made me think about there was one part of the one previous part of the debate where we were talking about how we're not coming at this from the angle of we're better than Tate or anyone, or like we're just kind of talking about and reacting in real time. And I had a real use example that shows perfectly how I succumb to the same pressures or the similar type of pressures that we were talking about with Tate always being in the fighter's mentality. And like, you don't have to be constantly competing when you're not in the ring. And we had a comment that I forget the exact comment, but it was along the lines of, it was saying something about this isn't like, I'm not even going to watch the video or something like that, just based on this clip.
Yeah, people were saying, this guy was saying that people might not watch the video because of the clip, and you commented.
and then I commented, look, watch it or don't. And by the way, your username is a perfect fit. And his username was something along the lines of emotional turd or like something.
It was imprisoned turd.
Imprisoned turd, yeah. So imprisoned turd.
I would love imprisoned turd.
Yes. Imprisoned turd is what I feel inside my stomach after I go to Five Guys. But I would love if you would watch the interview. I saw that comment and I immediately thought, how do I knock this guy the fuck out through my own comment? And that's what I said. And, you pointed out that there are other ways to respond, as you have learned being on Twitter with a huge following and also having been a guest on some of the biggest podcasts. I'm sure you've dealt with a barrage of negativity, statistically, when it comes down to when you're getting thousands of comments, just 1% is still, over 100 comments of negativity, or that's 10%. I should get it right. Over 10 comments, still dozens of negative comments at minimum. So that's it. That's an example of how, we're just all in this world trying to figure shit out. And Tate is a guy and I'm a guy and you're a girl and we're just trying to fucking figure it out.
Absolutely. Well said.
So yeah, it would be so fun if like 2 minutes later, I'm just fucking emotional tirade, just a complete blackout, just seeing red after everything I just said. But
listen, it's part of the range of what it means to be human, right?
Yeah.
Like I have my moments, you have your moments, we all have our moments. The purpose of this exercise is not to demonize or disparage ourselves for having moments. It's all about getting a right relationship with the full range of what it means to be human.
100%. So let's dive into it. This is the last 13 minutes, give or less, of the over 2 hour debate. If you're just tuning in to this part, there's another 2 parts before this, FYI. So this is the last section.
Driven by love or the desire for love, even. I think the reason a lot of men want to become rich is because they want to feel loved or feel important or to matter. Mm-hmm. I also feel like the reason that a lot of men do the things they do is for love, either of themselves or of someone else. I think the reason men go to work is because they love their family. The reason you go to the gym is because you love yourself. I think that love is a very powerful driving force. I certainly feel love. My world is full of love. Like, I would argue I'm one of the most loved people on the planet. Like, if I check my phone, it's just love.
Yeah.
It's endless emails of people I don't know who love me, endless females who do know me love me, endless pictures of children saying they miss me. Like, I'm a very loved person in a very loved world. I love a lot of people.
You love.
I absolutely love. But because I believe in myself so strongly, I feel...
Here's a question I have for you.
Okay.
When you see all of the comments that you get on Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, wherever it is, do you see, whether it's love or hate, do you see comments that are positive and identify that with love from other people and see negative comments and identify that as hate? Or is it non-emotional for you? Like, if you were scrolling through the comments and you saw a bunch of, like, I love you, this is amazing, you're always right about everything, or just like I enjoy your content, is that love from a stranger, or is that something different?
It's a good question. I think that love is something that requires incredible amounts of attention. I mean, we talked about this last time with regards to how much time a parent spends with their child that is connected to them demonstrating their love for their child. So I do think that time and attention in person is a measure of love. I will say, though, that like engagement, while it might not be engagement online, while it might not be a marker of deep love, it certainly is a marker of someone paying attention, right? On some level, they took out their time to type in this comment, whether negative or positive. They took out the time to comment. And so they are spending their attention or attending to what I've posted online. And while that might not register necessarily as love per se, I don't take it for granted. And I used to be very hostile towards hostile comments online. And if you find me on an off day, I'm sure I will be hostile again.
Yeah. She'll come for you.
Yeah. To comments online. But in my like optimal days, perhaps as Andrew might put it, in the days where I am like doing really well in the ring, so to speak.
Yeah.
I don't take the hostile comments seriously. And even more to the point, I take the hostile comments as a measure of, oh, this person took the time out of their busy day to engage with me. And their hostility has ultimately really nothing to do with me. It's how the words that I'm saying or I'm writing are landing for them. And I can't control that because there's context that they are part of that I don't understand, that I'm not privy to. There's their whole lived experience that I'm not aware of, which will like determine how they relate to what I'm saying. So part of my learning process has been to give up control on that level, trying to like figure out why this person is being hostile towards me. Listen, I don't know. I can't figure it out. I can't know. There's too many people that I would have to have a deep and abiding relationship with in order to figure out why. But I can be grateful that they took the time to engage because they didn't have to. Yeah. And if the content that I put out sparked their engagement, then there's something there that impacted them, whether negatively or positively. Something that impacted them, and that is a measure of connection, I would say. Not necessarily love, but it is a measure of connection. connection, and we as human beings require, need, thrive off of connection.
So you take the position that whether it's hate or love, positive, negative, it's some form of attention, and that attention, you shouldn't ascribe it to having to do with purely you. That person, especially if it's a negative comment, you know, it could be a guy that just got emasculated publicly by his girlfriend, and then the first woman that pops up on his YouTube channel, he just fucking goes with a negative. Yeah, yeah. It makes me think about should there be some sort of emotional check-in on platforms like YouTube or Instagram that's like it won't kick you out, but it's just something that says, hey, how are you feeling right now on a scale of 1 to 10? How grateful are you feeling? How relaxed are you feeling? And then if you say 3 out of 10, then there's a message that pops up that says, just letting you know, other people that have said 3 out of 10 have said some pretty hurtful things. You may be in an emotional state where you feel more combative or negative and wanting to express that, just like putting it out there. I don't think that'll ever happen, especially
you never know.
Yeah, because I feel like it may kick you off the platform before you even like that prompting may make you not want to engage. And I know that all these companies just care about like engagement, like how can we suck you in further? But I guess it could be a possibility.
I mean, that's certainly something that I foresee with my company, Theory of Enchantment. Like, we're trying to get people to pause and, you know, develop a deeper relationship with the layers of themselves so that they can notice when they're triggered. I mean, I feel like noticing when you're triggered is half the battle. Bringing conscious attention to when you're triggered is half the battle. And if there could be some sort of, like pop-up online that says, check in with how you're feeling, or even just like, I've seen these pop-ups where you can actually put it on your phone where you can't access Instagram unless you breathe deeply for like, I don't know, 5 seconds. I think there's this app called Just 1 Minute or something like that does this. So every time you pull up Instagram, you're forced to like pause before it comes up for you. So I don't know. I think that I could foresee a world or a future in which these platforms putting that on their website actually drives more engagement, not less. But I don't know.
Yeah. Time will tell.
Yeah.
Like, the way I love them is to have a degree of authority over them. Not in a crazy psychopathic way, but in a I love you, so you should do this.
Right.
I love you, so act this way. I love you, so don't do that. Almost in the same way a parent loves a child. You love your child, so you don't let them eat candy all day, because you love them.
Yeah.
I'm like that with everyone in my life, because I see myself as the most competent person on the planet. So I'm like, I love you, I care about you. You shouldn't do this way. Right. Because you may think you know better, but you don't. You don't know better than me. I know best, and this is how it should be for anyone I care about.
I wonder if there's anyone who Andrew thinks knows more than him.
That would be that would be fascinating to hear him answer that. If I were to take a complete guess at how he would respond, I would say that he believes that he's the most competent at all the things that he views as useful and dedicates time to, and then for the things that he's not, he just pays someone else or just doesn't even try it, because he said that to other similar line of questionings prior in this debate.
Yeah. Interesting.
I guess the reason I asked the question is, can you defeat the Matrix by fighting it? Or can you only defeat the Matrix through love?
Absolutely. That's a very astute question, and you're asking because you already know the answer.
And you already know the answer.
Of course, only love can win.
Yeah.
Only love can win.
Yeah.
And it's the most powerful driving force on the face of the planet. It always has been. And it's only when people are going to wake up and have a true love for themselves and love for their community and love for their children and love for these things that we're going to start to resist the evil and the Satanism and the insanity which is coming in the world today. But I believe, as a man at least, your love only has value when you're capable, which is why perhaps I'm so obsessed with capability, because I want my love to have value. We talked about how time has value when you're at a certain echelon. I would also argue that love has value at a certain echelon. If I'm in love with a girl, she can get a lot more from that love than if a Joe Schmo's in love with her, right? So my love has value because I have value. So I have to build myself and...
So pause. I know we sort of already talked about this last time, but Andrew has a very transactional perspective of the world and of himself. And, you know, even in his very, like, quick condescension of Joe Schmo, in that comparison there, seemed to me to be a window into that viewpoint, into his perception of the world as transactional. The subtext is like, I have more money, I have more status, I have more cars, I don't know, so therefore, if you spend more time with me, you'll get more out of spending more time with me than spending more time with the average Joe. And again, we hear the condescension towards and the dismissal of the average man. I think it's really important that men hear this and not like paper over that, because it's very, very subtle, but it's also very dehumanizing in many ways.
Yeah. I can see that. I also get what he's saying about the capability, and I've heard I think it was Jocko Willing talk about this in a different sort of sense. It wasn't as combative as Tate is talking about it right now, but Jocko Willing talks about being dangerous but not a danger to others, and to build capabilities within yourself of de-escalation through words, through combat sports with being able to defend yourself, protect yourself and the ones you love, and then also just with following your purpose. And that the difference between being weak and being someone who is strong is not necessarily the action, but the capability. So there can be two guys that back down from a fight. One guy's just weak and walked away from the fight because he would be completely incompetent, or just like there's no way he could have been successful in that situation doing anything else except walking away. And then another guy who could have completely kicked the shit out of the guy who's confronting him, but chooses to not flex on that guy in the moment and says, okay, I can de-escalate this just by walking away. I don't need to, I'm dangerous, but I'm not a danger. And I do get that aspect of what Tate is saying, where you want to have that within you, but I don't think you need to exercise it as often as someone like Tate is alluding to.
Yeah, I think Jordan Peterson has said something similar. And I remember the story from Jason Wilson, who talked about how this kid who was training with him was being bullied at school. And then when he trained with him, he was able to defend himself against the bullies or the bully. But when he defended himself against the bully, he actually had this opportunity to like basically head slam the guy down. But he made sure to catch the guy's head as he was bringing him down. So he was still defeating him, but simultaneously protecting him from serious harm and injury at the same time. And that is a type of capability that I'm not sure that Andrew is actually talking about right now.
Yeah, no, that goes one step further for sure. And that, I would argue, is more badass than completely destroying the dude's head. It's like, you know, I just choked you out or tripped you, but I'm going to tuck you in rather than completely put your lights out. It demonstrates more, like it would almost fuck with you more if like
exactly.
some guy like choked you out, like as you were going out, he just like kissed you on the forehead and read you a bedtime story, and like you woke up with a Gatorade and some snacks and the guy was gone, and you'd just be like, what the fuck? Rather than him just stomp on your head and possibly kill you.
Because he would be sharing that he actually cared about you.
Yeah.
And you're like, how do you make sense of that? That totally defeats your presuppositions that you had. It could defeat your presuppositions. It could lead to cognitive dissonance, where the structure with which you make sense of the world no longer makes sense, and then it forces it forces you to confront yourself. It forces you to confront your value system. It forces you to confront all the things you've believed up until this point that actually are no longer valid, because here's someone is showing up simultaneously as both your enemy and someone who cares for you. How does that work? Oh, it's not black and white. Oh, it's not do this, don't do this, right? It's actually, again, complex and nuanced.
Yeah. And by showing that you actually care somewhat about the person that attacked you, you are almost certainly diffusing future altercations with that person. Yeah. If you severely hurt that person or killed him or her, then either that person, if they survived, would want to come after you, or their family, friends would probably put a hit on you, and you would be in more danger than before the altercation even started. So by showing that person some love within the realm of combat, you're probably planting the seed of, maybe I could just chill out with this dude. I don't have to, go 12 rounds.
Yeah.
One more quick thing. Are you familiar with Gordon Ryan?
No, I'm not.
So he is the best no-gi jiu-jitsu competitor in the world. Okay. It absolutely exploded on social media, and in part of it is he's the best in the world, but also he's really good at shit talking, and he's not afraid to be combative on social media for people that are combative towards him. And he gets a lot of shit for being a piece of shit because of the way that he handles himself on social media, and a lot of that is the perception of him and not the actual actions that he's committing towards others.
Okay.
And I was watching a highlight video of Gordon Ryan competing in jiu-jitsu, and I don't think he's lost in, it must have been 50 or 60 matches. He is just by far the best. He's on a crazy win streak. And if you look at his matches, he submits people pretty gently in a manner where you could see that he cares about the well-being and the longevity of his competitors. And there are submissions in jiu-jitsu, like arm bars or leg locks, where if you wanted to, you could yank on someone's leg and hurt them pretty badly within the rules of the sport. You could yank on an arm bar and dislocate, tear someone's tendon. But if you watch him submit people, he gets them to the point of no return, and then he'll just kind of gently like wait for the tap. He won't just pull on it and yank and do as much damage and get the tap as quickly as possible, as quick as he could, but he protects his opponents a little bit. And
that's awesome.
Yeah, and just the example we were talking about before with the guy that knocks someone out, but then will or do the headlock, but then not destroy them completely, will catch their head and not let them. You wouldn't think that, based on the perception of Gordon Ryan on social media, that he would do that, because like a lot of people attack him and he's not afraid to go back. But if you look at his actions, he's actually a very respectful competitor. And it's hard for me to believe that if someone's going to be that respectful and gracious towards competitors with all the adrenaline running through their body, it's hard to believe that person would be anything but even nicer outside of competition when they're not all juiced up with adrenaline. So that it made me think of Gordon Ryan, that situation we were talking about.
This makes me curious about like being trained in different modalities. So obviously these guys are trained in many combat sports, in many martial arts, far more than I am. I mean, I'm not trained in any martial art, although I did start practicing. I did start training in capoeira a few weeks ago, which I'm really excited about.
That's awesome.
But yeah, so yeah, they have a skill set in that modality. They do not, however, have a skill set when it comes to verbal combat, right? So the question becomes, or more specifically, online text-based combat. So then the challenge I would offer is like, what are some of the skills and like nonviolent communication and even stoicism and those sorts of things? How can you bring that into the ring of social media where you can do the same thing, where you can, yes, defend yourself and yes, state your position and be assertive and all really positive, healthy things without needing to debase your opponent. So it sounds like there's an opportunity for him to scaffold what he does in the ring into the social media ring as well. And that's like integration, right? Like that's like everything in alignment.
So there are a lot of people that would argue, and I can see this point, that because Gordon Ryan's social media has risen to be by far and away the most followed person in the sport, I believe he even has more followers than the league he's a part of, than the not the UFC, but like the jiu-jitsu version of that. Gordon Ryan is bigger than the platform in which he competes, and people may say that the sport wouldn't be at the place it is right now with as many people competing if there wasn't an aspect of shit talk. And I think a lot of it is playful too, like, and also selling tickets to fights, because you need to also build a story and have a reason, have an emotional investment in whoever's fighting. So I wonder if there's a way to stoically shit talk. That would be a course that I would take. That would be a course. Stoic shit talking 101.
Yeah. That's you heard it here, folks. I think I mean, you bring up a good point. I actually think at the same time with everything that I'm saying, like, shit talking is a way to discharge energy, and it can be a healthy way to discharge energy. I think that it becomes really challenging because it's on social media, so it's not in a living context. Like, if I just shit talk you to your face, that's very different from you reading something that I post online. It's not quite as direct, and it's not embodied, right? So yeah, there's like a lot of minefields to avoid in this, but I definitely think that shit talking can be actually a very healthy way to discharge. But you're dealing with social media, which is like, it has new layers of challenge when it comes to verbal acuity and how we connect with each other online. And you know, when I'm communicating with you, I'm not seeing your face. All these things sort of can take us out of connection and separate us.
Yeah, there is an art to the pre-fight press conference and the post-fight interview when you see the guys in person, and you the McGregors, the Gordon Ryans, they're just talking shit, and they're it's almost like poetry when someone's good at it, because they're going back and forth, and the words a lot of times don't even have as much meaning as the emotions that they're putting behind it. And when you get guys going back and forth, Chael Sonnen was, I think, the guy that pretty much started that all in the UFC, is turning shit talking into an art form. That is a spectacle to watch. So I would be curious to see if that could be translated in some form to social media with just text based, but it would probably be pretty hard without the inflections and emotions in your voice.
For sure, yeah.
Especially as a man, if you want to feel loved and you want to give love, the more capable you become, the more valuable your love's going to be, and that's certainly how we're going to fix the world. So yeah, the answer is love, of course, but it can't just be blind, empty love. It has to be love that is backed by a brutal, harsh capability, which is born in the worst scenarios you're going to endure as a man. And the world at its baseline is a very brutal place. It can be. And I think that...
Pause, please. So it's interesting. He shifted. He said, the world is a very brutal place. It can be. I'd be curious about that. I would lean more towards the it can be than the definitive is. I mean, it's a very Hobbesian philosophy that he's promoting here, who basically believe that the world was brutal. But I think that to say definitively that it is brutal is actually pretty ahistorical. There's a book called The Dawn of Everything by David Graeber and David Wengrow, one anthropologist, the other archaeologist, and they do this massive study of indigenous cultures and tribes that have existed since, I guess, the end of the Ice Age. And they show how, like, some tribes lived and they had slavery. Other tribes lived and they were very egalitarian. And the basic point is to show how varied and diverse and complex the human experience is. And so I think it's really dangerous to get into this absolutist mindset. Again, it's very black and white, very split-like mentality that Andrew sort of teeters over here. It certainly, of course, can be brutal, and you want to be capable to meet that brutality. But to say that it is brutal, which I think is more the place where he operates out of, if I were to guess, I think is actually a distortion on many levels.
Yeah, and he's also filtering the brutality through his own personal lens, and he's at ground zero of controversy. So if he projects his own obstacles onto the rest of the world, he may find that he's in some more brutal situations, especially on social media, than the average person who's just logging on Twitter to see someone make a sandwich. It's completely different. And it also depends on where you are too. If you know, I'm in a thriving city in Panama, and then if I go a few hours to the east, there's the Darien Gap, which is the thick jungle between Colombia and Panama, which is just overrun by migrants and cartels, and like they basically just tell you, like, don't even get near there. And if you ask someone who's trying to cross the Darien Gap, they'd probably say, like, yeah, life is pretty fucking brutal. Like, I'm willing to risk my life to cross this to get from Colombia to Panama, and then, you know, maybe eventually to Mexico, US. But it also it's very subjective too.
For sure.
Becoming comfortable with those scenarios and becoming capable in those scenarios is how you give your love deep, true value. But I think that, love is the answer. Right. Love is the answer. But I don't want to end. I don't want.
That's hard for you to say.
No.
It's like the Fonz.
No. Yeah. love. But we have to make this clear.
We just real quick. We talked about, I think it was part 2, about the eye movements and the field that says that that's connected to different emotions. He so obviously just looked away, just couldn't even make eye contact with David Sutcliffe. He's like, love is the answer. And then he kind of smirked and looked even further away, and he goes, love is the answer. Fuck. Like,
yeah, he's not, it doesn't live in him. Like, that truth doesn't live in him yet. You know, it might come to live in him in the future, but it doesn't live in him yet.
Yeah.
Because most people misunderstand what love is.
I understand.
No, because you say love is
but
the
not
answer.
coming from you. I don't think they're going to misunderstand it coming from you. And I guess this is it. Like, maybe this is it. Maybe this is what people want more from you. Yeah. Right? They want your love. They want to feel your love. I see it. Yeah. Right? Like, I can feel it coming off you, but I'm not, like, I see your sense of humor. I see how you work. So I don't feel threatened by you, right? I feel like I understand you in some way. But a lot of people can. And I think that to me is the problem in the world right now, is that people cannot feel the Father's love.
I agree with you.
And if they could feel that, and also the firmness, also the direction, all the things you're talking about, the discipline, but if they can't feel the Father's love, I mean, that's God's love coming through. And the Father is the embodiment of God on earth. If they can't feel that love, then we're going to have a lot of fucking problems.
But that's super interesting, because they've hijacked the word love now, and they've confused the word love with tolerance and a complete lack of boundaries. And they're saying, if you're a loving person, you accept all this garbage. No, I disagree with that. You just said a very important thing. You said father's love. A father's love comes with tests and trials and tribulations. What does a dad even traditionally do for his son? take him out there, push him in the pool, let him struggle a bit, get him out. Put him on the bike, let him fall over, help him get up. You have to go through the bad things to be rewarded and the bad things to learn. That's how a father typically loves. And a father also loves by saying no. No, you cannot do that. So you nailed it by how society needs a father's love. Completely true. And society has actually hijacked the word love and tried to convince you that you don't need the father's love. Perhaps you need this unconditional love, which is more like a mother's love, if you want to gender it, perhaps. So it's unconditional. You can act without honor, you can act without courage, you can act without discipline, and you'll be loved anyway just because you exist. I don't believe that for myself. I believe if I remove all of my morality, I will not just be loved by default, not by my family, not by God, not by society. I don't believe that. And the people who do believe that, who think I should be loved just for existing, regardless of how I act and what I think, those are some of the most evil people on the planet. I truly believe. And they're also some of the most unsuccessful.
Can you pause? So he said a lot here. So I just want to notice some observations. The first observation is, well, I guess I can work backwards. For all intents and purposes, or what I'm aware of, is that Andrew used to be a Christian before he converted to Islam. And Christianity, in my experience and in many others' experiences, is very patriarchal. It's in the sense that God has no daughters, right? God has a son, and his famous son is Jesus. But God has no daughters. And I think that it could be argued that that is a marker of patriarchy, and simply in the sense that the value system is embodied by men, right? As the sort of the highest apex. Now, I think there's problems with that we don't have to go into, but one of the characteristics of Christianity is this idea of unconditional love. I mean, this is like a huge revolution that Christianity brought or birthed into the world, and these were embodied by men. So this idea that unconditional love, or agape love, as it is called in the Christian text, New Testament, in the Greek, is somehow exclusively associated with women is absurd, and it's ahistorical. I also think that he conflates unconditional love with you can do whatever you want to do. I don't think that that's love. In fact, he just said it wasn't love. He said, if I love you, I will discipline you. I will tell you what's right and what's wrong. I will, show you what's good and what's not good. I think that all of those things are characteristics of unconditional love. Otherwise, we have a contradiction here. Either love entails all of that or it doesn't. Unconditional love is, so let me see if I can pull out this metaphor. From a, let's say, a more feminine perspective, unconditional love is the type of love that a parent expresses for their child, especially for their infant child. And what do I mean by this? There's a psychologist whose name I'm going to forget who observed this, but Alice Miller talks about it in her book, Drama of the Gifted Child. She says when a parent is holding their infant, what is important for the child's development is to mirror that infant. And John Vervaeke, a cognitive scientist at the University of Toronto, points out that we actually develop our sense of self by being mirrored by others. And what does that mean practically? It means that in order for a child to feel safe and secure in who they are, they need to be met by their parents. So if an infant is crying, then it is a parent's responsibility to mirror that in the sense of nurturing that child while that child is crying. Right? It is a parent's response. This is why you see when people play with infants or when people play with babies, when babies make, let's say, funny faces, a parent might mirror that funny face, right? Or when a child is crying, also they might sort of like imitate the child in their tone of voice. That's what I mean by mirroring, right? That is more what is meant by unconditional love. It's this capacity to hold space for all the different facets of the child. And in holding space for all the different conditions of the child, or all the different complexities of the child actually becomes secure enough to stand on their own 2 feet. And it's no coincidence that agape love, again, in the Christian tradition, in the New Testament, is basically a parent's love. That's why it's always described as like the father's love, right, in Christian terminology. And it's that capacity to hold space for all the different, again, complexities of the child that helps that child develop a sense of self from which they can actually stand on their own 2 feet. What you don't want to do is you don't want to instead project your own insecurities onto the child as a parent, right? And hope that your child becomes everything that you could not be, right, as an adult. Like everything that you aspire to become but didn't. That's arguably a form of child abuse. But a lot of parents do that. That's something I wanted to point out. Another thing I wanted to point out is to echo what David said. Yes, we need the father's love. A prerequisite of the father's love is that the father is present, and this is something that continues to be avoided by Andrew, because in order to do all of those things, in order to show your child what is right and wrong, in order to steer your child away from harm and towards success, and all these things, you have to be present. It's a prerequisite. And it's like, is Andrew qualified to be an embodiment of the father's love if he is imitating his father, who very simply was not present? It's a basic question that we all have to ask, and that he has to ask himself as he wrestles with his past and with the baggage, and we all have baggage, with the baggage and the blessings that his father passed down to him.
Yeah, mirroring is a form of love.
Yes.
As a parent. And if you mirror insecurities or lack of presence or both back, then you're just repeating the cycle that's been done to you in a way. And then your kid may grow up to learn to do that. That's interesting. It makes me think about impressions, like the actual like art of doing impressions. And I've always heard people say that you can't have a good impression without having some form of love for the person that you're trying to mimic. And I've always just taken that as a surface level thing of, whatever, like do you really love the person that you're doing an impression? But hearing the way that you put it with mirroring someone, and mirroring requires a form of love because you're invested in absorbing their facial expressions, their attitudes, their emotions, and projecting it back to them, or projecting it back to an audience, onto the world. That does make a lot of sense, where if you have if you're doing an impression of Eddie Murphy or Donald Trump or whoever it is, if you have pure hatred for that person, it probably won't come off as good because you're not totally invested in the true form of what that person is projecting to you, and then you're not going to project a mirror back to them.
Yeah.
So
I think that a simple way to think about it is human beings need to be deeply seen. We need to know that we're being deeply seen in order to feel connection and in order to feel love. Like, I could be walking around with a bunch of insecurities, a whole lot of baggage, but if I can vulnerably communicate what's going on, the shit that I have going on in my life, and you can hear that and really like make space for that, then what we have here is a friendship in which we both feel like we can come to each other and be deeply seen. Like insecurities and all, right? Warts and all. That actually gives us the space to grow. It's the difference between not doing something because I feel guilty for not doing it versus not doing something because I know doing that will cause harm to you and I care about you, right? But I can't get to that place if you can't see me and accept me for who I am. Again, mistakes and all, warts and all. So, and my sense is that Andrew did not get that in his childhood. So he, again, as a reminder to the audience, everything that he is saying is a reflection or an expression of how he was raised.
Yeah.
It's not the objective capital T truth.
And he as a person is the most seen person on the planet in terms of social media views, but that doesn't really count. And I'm just speaking from personal experience. If I have a reel that does well, you get a short burst of adrenaline and you go, oh, that's sick. Yeah. I like the likes. More people are going to check out this episode. And I do appreciate it. But, 15,000 likes pales in comparison to one person just spending 5 minutes truly invested in how you're feeling or what's going on with you that day. It's a deeper, more wholesome feeling when someone is seeing you as a person face to face than when, thousands or millions of people are seeing you on a surface level.
Yeah, and if you did not get, this is the thing, this is why we need to be mirrored, because if we're not mirrored in childhood, then we will spend our lives roamlessly seeking external validation to fill the gap for what we missed out on in childhood. And you can see that happening. You can see that dynamic, like in how he defines love as, being missed by his kids or getting tons of likes and retweets online or getting emails from people. There's a difference in the quality of love that you experience with parents that are present versus people who are sending you likes on YouTube, right? It seems absurd to have to be able to even explain this, but there's a difference.
Yeah. That's also a good argument for having kids later. Because if I had a kid at 22 versus 32, the amount of shit that I've worked through in those 10 years is going to make such a difference for how I'm interacting with my kid.
Yeah, of course.
So maybe it's a good thing in a way that people are having kids later and later, at least in America.
Yeah.
Because you're, if you're a human being walking through this world, you're forced to confront your weaknesses, your insecurities on a day-to-day basis. And sure, you can kind of just sweep those aside with your ego and go, I don't need to work on anything. But I think a lot of people are at least partially aware of those insecurities and weaknesses and do a lot of building between the years of 20 and 30 or 30 and 40. Like it just gets exponentially better in the way that you can handle that and also handling that with a kid.
Yeah.
Unspectacular, and they're the people who are out here genuinely trying to change society in a direction which has never been tested, which I believe is going to lead down to the depths of hell, truly. I think it's evil. So yeah, I agree with you. Father's love is important, but love in and of itself has boundaries. Love is strict. Love is hard. Yes. Love is a hard emotion.
Fierce.
Love is fierce. Love is not an emotion of, do whatever you want. It's the opposite. Love is, no, you have to do this. I believe love is a very hard, very strong emotion. And if I think of how, let's say I have two women, one I love, one I don't love, and I enjoy both of their company, I'm harder on the one I love. I expect more from her in terms of how she acts. I expect more from her in terms of how she speaks to me. I expect more from her in how she presents herself to the world. The more I love her, the more I expect of her, the more parameters I want to put on her in regards to how she should behave, because I love her. Love is a hard emotion. So yeah, love wins, but not in the way that people think love. They've hijacked the word love and convinced people that love means, I tolerate everything. Right. That's not love.
I agree, and it goes back to this.
It sounds like a burden to be loved by Andrew Tate. He makes it sound like if Tate loves you, you're like an Egyptian slave carrying all these blocks on your back. Here's something I expect from you. Here's another thing I expect from you.
Yeah. Another task.
Yeah.
Prove that you're worthy.
Yeah.
It's so terrible.
100%.
It's a terrible, it's such a narrow, it's like if you had the full range of musical chords to play with, but you only knew the C chord. That's like, you can do a lot of things with the C chord, but you're missing out on a lot of range there.
100%.
What we're talking about with presence, I wonder, and I'm just having this thought now, that if we come all the way into presence, if we allow ourselves to be all the way here and feel everything that's here, that is actually the thing that we would feel, love. Like God, which is, you could say God is love. And maybe that's the scariest thing. That's the edge. Because if we're fully surrendered to that, like we're in that flow state, that is the dissolution of the ego, a letting go of all the things that we have, and we have to be in that place. And so maybe that to me is like, you know, if you want to defeat the Matrix, right? Like if you want to become Neo, I think that's what it is.
Interesting. And what I will do, and I will take away from this conversation, is I definitely have moments of presence. I mean, I'm human. I do have like a couple minutes where I sit and just look around and go, you know, life's not all that bad, of course. But I will perhaps try and dedicate a little bit more time. Maybe I can I'll see if I can allocate 3 minutes instead of 2 towards presence and see how that makes me feel overall. It's interesting that you said when you're present, you feel love. I actually completely agree with that. I can't think of a time I've been present and felt anything other than gratefulness. Just to look around and go, you know what? Everything's fine. In fact, even in jail that happened. Even in jail, I had moments of presence, and I looked around and go, this is not nearly as bad as like the media is saying it is, and the women on the phone are crying, and everyone's panicking. You know what? I'm not in a trench. I'm probably not going to get blown up. If a fire started, could I get through that steel door? If anyone could, it's me. I'm not on a submarine in World War II. There's no depth charges. I'm not in a car crash. It's fine. Cup of tea. I did have those moments, right? So when you come to a moment, when you come to a moment of presence, even in a terrible scenario, it often ends up love. You're right. And I certainly have felt them, and I certainly could do it. My rationale would be, my argument would be, does that make me more powerful? You're arguing it does, and maybe perhaps I need to try it. Whereas I would typically, up until this conversation, I would say, I don't have time for that. I have things to do. Right. So that's where it all comes down to. And then it comes down to, like I said earlier, am I here as a human to enjoy my experience as a human and enjoy being in this vessel and have as much fun as possible and be as present as possible? Or am I here to make the biggest impact I can possibly make and build a legacy? And of course, probably like most things in life, the answer is somewhere in between the two. It's probably some balance. Perhaps I'm slightly out of balance, and that's why I am living the life I am. But I'm not unhappy with it. And if I was unhappy with it, it wouldn't change anything. But I actually do consider myself, I do genuinely consider myself one of, because I put no importance on emotion. And when I say that, I try and make people understand that when I say no importance, it doesn't affect how I act. So I don't see the point in talking about it, or I don't see the point in even acknowledging it, because it doesn't affect what I'm going to do for the day. So who cares, right? It doesn't matter if it's sunny or raining. If you're going to go to work, you're going to go to work. So why talk about the weather? So I don't put any importance on emotion. But I would actually call myself one of the happiest people on earth, not because I'm particularly happy, but because I'm just never sad. So if it's never dark, it must be light. If it's never cold, it must be hot. So when I say, I will say I'm one of the happiest people on earth, and people think, oh, he's happy all.
Can you pause for a second? So I will just point out that last thing that he just said made no sense. The whole, like, if it's never dark, it's always light. If it's never, I forgot the other thing that he said. If it's never raining, it's always sunshine or something like that.
Yeah.
Actually, you cannot, this is what he said earlier, which he's not integrating now. You cannot have darkness without light. You cannot have sunshine without rain. The two exist, the two depend upon each other in order to exist.
Yeah.
So if you never experience sadness, which I don't think is possible unless you're a psychopath, but if you never experience sadness, it cannot be said that you actually know what it is like to feel happy, because there's an inherent contrast to the two. If you don't know what it's like to feel sorrow, I would argue that you can't know what it's like to feel joy. Because again, the two are in a dynamic relationship. It's part of the human range of emotions, which he doesn't believe in, doesn't think exists, whatever. But I think there's a fundamental misapprehension of reality that he's like articulating right now.
Yeah, I wonder if, because he said he puts no value in emotions and doesn't really care about them, and he's trained as a fighter, which relies so much on signals. You're getting signals from people's body language, you're getting signals from hand-eye movement. If emotions were phrased differently to mean something more of a signal, like if it's a feeling signal or traumatic signal or like a situational signal, would he pay attention to them? Because the word emotions is kind of like a blah word. Like if he hears the word to Tate, like if you hear the word emotions, he's just like, like emotion, like,
which is of course
weak.
an emotional response, right? In and of itself. Right. But to your point, it's crazy. Emotion just means energy moving, energy in motion. It is a neutral term. And you're right. When he's fighting, he has to be aware of it because it affects how he fights or doesn't fight. It is literally impossible to not have emotions. It is literally impossible to not be affected by emotions. It's just energy moving through you. And it could be energy that is interpreted as sadness, as joy, as happiness, as frustration. It's all just energy moving through you. And there's nothing irrational, in fact, about that at all.
Yeah. Hearing Tate talk about emotions is like listening to a fish tell you that he's not affected by the water. It's just like this fish getting thrashed back and forth, and he's just goes, yeah, whatever the current is, I'm going to do exactly the same thing. And it's like, no, you're not. If the fucking like North Atlantic current just came in and swept you to Africa, you can't not go to Africa. You're going to the places that your body is signaling for you to go, and only when you're aware that that's happening can you remove yourself and become a more objective observer and kind of learn to deal with your emotions. But it's like to go back to the fighting thing, it's like he sees the physical opponents, but it's like he's being shellacked by this shadow opponent constantly, and he doesn't see that these punches are being thrown at him by his emotions, and he's just kind of like taking the shots and being like, well, I guess this is how I would have acted, when in reality there are all these forces, these energies that are moving through him and igniting certain reactions in him.
Absolutely. Yeah, I want to see an Andrew who's in touch with his emotions. I 100% bet that would be a more powerful and more chilled out Andrew. Simultaneously, more powerful and more chill.
Yeah, 100%.
All the time. No, I'm just never sad. Right. Never. So if you're never sad, you're always happy. Another thing I'll actually argue. Not getting out this early. Not getting out.
It's so unbelievable. That analogy is so bad. It's like if I was making dinner every night at a restaurant and the only qualification was that the dinner's not a pile of shit. I'm not shitting on your plate and giving it to you. Therefore, it must be decadent. Therefore, it must be good.
Incredible. Actually.
It's like, well, it's incredible. And if someone's like, yeah, this isn't that good, and I go, well, it's not shit. I didn't shit on a plate, so it has to be good. That's like what it sounds like when he's going, well, I'm not sad, so I have to be happy. Like this is happiness, I guess. Like these are the only two options, is one or the other.
Wild.
That's easy.
I thought I got away with a win there.
I would actually argue that.
Why are you arguing? What are you arguing?
Because maybe you won't disagree with me. Okay, I would also like to I will just explain. When we were talking about how I've built my mental model and how I rationalize everything, one of the things I've done when I rationalize is I've changed the boundary of what I believe happy to be. So let's say happiness is this line on this table, right? Most people, this is the full spectrum of human emotion. This is absolute distraught because your parents just died. And this is extremely happy and giddish and you're laughing and jumping around like a child for whatever reason. Most people would probably put happy somewhere up here near the top. Whereas I've just changed that bar and I've just said, unless I'm truly distraught, unless I'm actually at the point where I can barely speak, let's move happiness down to here. Unless I'm truly distraught and something really bad's happened to me, I've already passed the threshold and I'm just a different level of happy. Now, the more I talk to you, the more I realize that a lot of what I've done are just simply semantic tricks. They're language tricks. I've changed language tricks. If I'm not absolutely distraught, I am some version of happy, therefore I'm the happiest man on earth because I'm always some level of happy. It's semantic tricks, but if it works, I mean, it could be a cheap language trick, but if the cheap language trick works, then it's more than a cheap language trick. So I've also changed what I believe happy to be. I think that there's probably 5 or 6 times in your adult life you're going to be unhappy, and the rest of the time you're just a different level of happy. Maybe less happy, more happy, but you're all at some point of happy. If you can speak, you're happy enough, because when you're truly upset, you can't even talk. That's what I believe.
Is that enough?
Is that all I have to say? It's interesting, yeah, because
So here, you want me to tell you what I noticed?
Sure.
It is hard for you to stay present.
Yeah.
Right? Like you come present, and then you go to a thought, you go to an idea, and you talk, and it's very convincing, and it's very persuasive. Yeah. And you're asserting your worldview, your frame of reality, which, but like sometimes like I lose you there. Yeah. Like I'm like, where are you? Like there's words, but I can't feel you entirely.
I understand.
You know what I mean? And I want to like feel you more.
I understand.
You know what I mean?
I understand, but I don't think.
But just stay with that. Just stay in that. Like don't let your mind go. Just stay in the feeling. Yeah, don't go off with a thought.
So what am I feeling right now?
But just stay with me.
Okay.
Just stay with me and be present in the experience with no words and see what happens.
Sure.
Like something will change in how we relate to each other. Something will soften. Like if you let yourself soften and just be with me. Yeah. Right? Which is kind of a weird experience for two men to have. Yep. Right? But it's actually what children long for with their father. It's actually what we long for is deeper levels of connection. Yes. You just let yourself be here with me and just see what happens.
But then what are we going to talk about?
We don't have to talk about anything. Doesn't it feel good to feel another man? Like just to feel the strength, like without the words, without that layer of thought and dialogue and discussion? Come back.
I'm thinking.
Come back.
But
Don't think.
But I have to.
You don't have to. Just be here. This is the place you get to when you're fighting. It feels good.
It's true, but
doesn't it feel good?
Yes, but there's an action involved. Like I can feel everything about the person I'm fighting, whether it's good or bad. And I can feel if I've hurt them or not.
Feel me.
I don't get to punch you, my friend.
You don't.
It's been good fun, and I feel like I've learned some things, and I feel like we need to do it again.
Absolutely. Yeah, that was fun. I appreciate you, man.
Thank you, bro.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. The end game.
So we end gamed. We did it. So there are some Jungian writers who say that the masculine energy, first of all, they say that men and women have masculine and feminine energies in them. But masculine energy is about doing, and feminine energy is about being.
Mm.
And you could see that challenge to Andrew at the end of that, where David basically challenges him to simply be without needing to engage in some action. And that particular last exchange was the part where I saw Uncle Iroh from Avatar: The Last Airbender, for all of you Avatar heads out there, who's this incredible figure in the show who cares about his nephew, but his nephew is going down a terrible path, and he basically does things that are very similar to what David does in this video to get Andrew to slow down and to understand, start to understand that, like, you don't always need to be in fight mode. You can slow down and take in the beauty of the present moment, and you will discover new powers, and new ways of being and new ways of perceiving if you actually allow yourself to slow down.
Yeah. Yeah, I started tearing up a little bit, and I am not exactly sure why, but just that moment of presence at the end felt like Tate was dropping into something that he'd never really explored before. And that sort of moment makes me tear up. Like when I see someone doing something that they didn't realize that they could do. And I feel like that was the start of him engaging in present moments like that.
Absolutely. And like I said, I hope he does the work. I hope he continues to be in conversation with David, and someone needs to tell him that emotion is just energy in motion.
Yes.
And it's what he does all the time when he decides to fight. He's energy in motion.
Yeah.
And I wish him the very best.
Yeah, me too. I'd be interested to have a breakdown of what he does in between this and the next interview, if it does happen, because it's definitely going to be different one way or the other, or 1,000 different ways. But to know if this interview changed any of Tate's actions, if he started meditating for 10 minutes a day or just going on long walks for no point other than to just walk around and just be in nature. I'd be curious to see. He'll probably talk about that next time they hop on.
Well, we will certainly be watching if and when that happens.
Yeah. And I have to say, going into this 3-part series with you, I was fascinated by the idea of reacting to a debate with Andrew Tate and doing it with you because we had such great discussions prior to this, but doing it completely remotely while also watching someone else. The one concern that I had was that, it's not going to feel like we're reacting because I'm just going to be too distracted by, like, is the connection working?
Sure.
Everything's going to lag. I'm going to be too occupied by other things. And I have to say, this is the most present I've felt doing a remote recording and just sort of dropping into it. And, we had a few speed bumps with connections here and there, but I did really feel like time passed quickly. And that is a function of just, going through it and being present and reacting to it. So thank you so much for doing this. And this,
my pleasure.
It's been an absolute blast. And I look forward to doing it again sometime. But even if we don't, just this was amazing. So thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, I've also experienced being present with you during this podcast recording. Thank you for accepting the invitation to dive deep into the world of Andrew Tate, and let's try to like model what we want to see in the world, even when we are dealing with someone who has had impact, and that impact has been, I think, both positive and negative in many ways. So I've enjoyed the challenge of trying to model compassion while commenting on this conversation. So thank you.
And just like that, the Tate Chronicles have come to an end. But it lives out in the media landscape. So I hope you guys enjoyed this, and we'll talk soon.
Talk soon.